Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H Virtual Event Space. You are tuned in to Mastering Lighting 123, a journey into the world of photography hosted by Godox. For that, I'd like to welcome photographer Sarah Edmunds to the program. Sarah, how's it going?
It's going great. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. And thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing some beautiful images over the next hour and getting your expertise and insight into not just one light setups, but 2 light, 3 light. For all the people out there like me who are just like, one light's enough, that's all I need, or natural light is the way to go. We're going to get to up our game today. So get your notepads out. If you are watching us, feel free to get your questions in. Sarah, we'll be taking some Q&A at the end. So a special welcome to those joining us on the B&H website, Vimeo, and YouTube Live. Again, if you do have those questions, just drop them into the comment section there. If you're joining us right here on Zoom, we have that wonderful Q&A module at your fingertips. Sarah, show is yours. I'll see you in a bit for some Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to hear all of your questions. So please throw them in there and I will try to get to everything, I promise. So I'm going to share my screen so I can just share with you my presentation that I have now. Mastering lighting 123. Yeah, we're going to be talking about 1, 2, 3 lights and lots of things in between. So who am I? If you don't know me and my work, a little bit about me, you might be thinking, where's she from? Where's that accent from? I was born and raised in South Wales in Great Britain, but I've been living in Italy for a very, very long time, since 1996. I've been a self-employed business owner for my entire adult life, so 30 years now. And I've been a freelancer. I've owned many different businesses. And I actually got into photography 2010, 2011, when I was 38. So a little bit later in life. But before that, I didn't have any photography experience whatsoever. I've been published in a few wonderful publications. Photo Professional, there's my cover there. Sposa White in Italy, which is a wonderful wedding magazine, Wedding Ideas in the UK, Rangefinder, fantastic magazine, Professional Image Maker, which is the Society's professional magazine in the UK. Very proud of all of that. I photograph portrait, wedding, a little bit of commercial with fashion and beauty, and I also spend a lot of time teaching, mentoring people, and I have an editing business as well. And that's at love-edits.com. My websites are there on the screen, sarahedmunds.co, loveedits.com, and loveweddings.it. And give me a follow on Instagram, and you can follow my work and my reels and my stories at Sarah Edmunds Photographer and at loveweddings.italy for the weddings side of things. I'm also very proud to be an ambassador for Godox, and they are hosting this today. I'll be talking a lot about their lighting later on, and I have been, just so you know, I was using Godox, I was a passionate user of Godox way before they approached me to be their ambassador. In fact, they kind of approached me, I think, because I was already an ambassador for them, just because I'm so passionate about their products. I'm also an avid participant in photography print competition, and I like to give back to the community by being a judge, and I judge all over the world for print competitions and online competitions as well. So these are some examples of the things that I shoot that you might have seen, and I've tried to cultivate a style over the years using light and natural light, and I try to bring that into my weddings as well. And that's this sort of work here that you can just see a sample of. Now, the question I get asked all the time is, how much of this is retouching? And the answer is sometimes it's nothing, and sometimes it's a lot, like this example here. This is a prime example of something a little bit more creative, but the lighting is the fundamental foundation of the building blocks of, then it's my canvas, really. It's my paint, it's my oils, and then I go and then I paint in Photoshop. But very often, for example, in weddings, I'm not using very much retouching at all, and I'm just doing a light Lightroom edit. I have a Facebook group called Love Edits, so go ahead and scan that screen and join my Facebook group, and there's lots of information about all of my editing and lighting in there as well. So everybody always wants to know what I'm shooting with, what I'm using to shoot. So let's get that out of the way and talk about the gear list. So I shoot Sony. I have two A7R3s, and on one camera, on one hip, I usually have my 70-200 2.8. That's a GM lens. And I'll probably have a 35mm or a 50mm on the other. And that's usually in the studio and out on location and at weddings as well. I also love to use an 85mm in the studio if I want to just have a little bit of extra shallow depth of field. My Godox lighting equipment. I do have a lot of equipment. So I want to tell you all of what I have, which is the AD100 Pro, the AD200 Pro, the 300 Pro, 600 Pro, and the 1200 Pro. I use an X Pro trigger, which is the one that I find to be the most intuitive and the easiest to deal with. And I have lots of modifiers as well. But I want to talk to you about what my favorites are, because that's another question I tend to get a lot as well. So these are my absolute favorites. And you might be surprised because I like to use small and light equipment. Sometimes you do need that extra kick of power, and we'll be talking about that later. But I love my AD300 Pro, which is the one on the left there. My 200s, which was that's what led me to the wonderful world of Godox, a very trusted and distinguished colleague of mine who knows a lot about lighting, tipped me off to the AD200s when they were released in 2017, and I never looked back. I cannot live without these lights in my bag. I have 3 of them and I love them. The AD100 Pro is the one on the right, and that's a little soda can sized light with quite a punch. It's more powerful than a speed light, and it's tiny and it's light, and it just fits in my handbag and I can take it anywhere. They're all battery operated. My lighting wedding kit, these are the lighting modifiers that are very quick to put up and take down. They're small, they're light, and those magnetized modifiers for the round head of the 200 and the 100. On the right, you can see there, they just pop on and off with the magnet. So it's quick, it's easy, it's light. That's what I love. In the studio, I love these. Classic softbox. I think I have the 120 centimeter, nothing too big. I love the lantern as well. It's got a 360 light that just goes all over the studio, and which bounces off the white walls in my studio. So I really like that as well. The big umbrella, I don't use a lot because it is quite big, and I love the silver beauty dish. I love the specularity that you get on the face with that beauty dish. It really kind of makes the skin glow. So why is lighting important? Why am I here to talk all about lighting? Well, because think about photography. The word photography, it means writing with light, okay? So mastering light means that you can bring your vision to life using your equipment, using your camera, but using the lighting equipment that you have at your disposal, or natural light as well, okay? All of the principles we're going to be talking about is, let's say, it really doesn't matter if it's natural light or artificial light or continuous light, flash, strobe, whatever. You still need to understand how it works and how it can be controlled. If you fail to master it, and when I say master, I mean control, you will never truly be in charge of the images that you craft. You'll have great difficulty in bringing your visions to life because you'll be slave really to your circumstances, and that's what we want to fix with lighting. So some simple guidelines about what we're talking about today. Studio work. What we're trying to do is create a black box. And when I say that, I don't mean an actual black box, an actual dark studio. You don't have to have a closed off black studio. You create the black box with your camera settings, and then you allow exactly enough light in, whether it's the ambient light or the flashlight, in order to fall on the subject exactly where you want it. Okay, so you're no longer slave to the lights in the ceiling or the light coming in through the window. If it's a cloudy day or a rainy day, or it's winter and it gets dark at 3 p.m. like it does in Italy. So what we want to do is create that black box and then have the control. optional. If you have a studio with daylight like I do, what I like to do is use the ambient light as my assistant light, let's say. So what I do is I let the ambient light come into the image as a fill layer. And that is, as I said, my second light. So instead of adding a second light as a fill light, I use the ambient light as my fill light, because daylight is fairly close to the color temperature of strobe light. Not exactly, and it depends on the time of day, etc., but it's pretty close. So that means that you can kind of combine the two, and that's what you do on location. So you let in more ambient light, and you do that by controlling your shutter speed, okay? Because if you're brand new to using strobe, then what you might not know is that it's the aperture, or your f-stop, which controls the strobe light, and it's the shutter speed which controls the ambient light, okay? And I'm talking about assuming that we're working within the sync speed of the camera. So shaping light, aka the mysterious light quality. Okay, I've heard this phrase bandied around. It has a fabulous quality of light. What does that mean? Okay, if light is just photons, then how do we create this quality of light? How do we control this? How do we make magical light quality? Well, it's not just about power. In fact, you've seen my favorite lights are actually the smaller lights, the lighter lights. They're not the more powerful lights, although I do love the powerful lights for certain circumstances that we're going to see later on. What I like to teach my students when it comes to lighting are the 3 Ds. Okay, so there's direction, diffusion, and distance. And with these 3 things, we can control light. Again, as I said, I'm leaving power aside for the moment. We're just talking about direction, diffusion, and distance. And why are these things important? Well, direction. Direction is what creates the way the shadows fall on the face or on the body or on the subject, on the architecture, whatever it is you're photographing. And it's the direction of light that provides the classic lighting patterns. You might have heard of butterfly lighting patterns, Rembrandt lighting patterns, split lighting, loop lighting. These are lighting patterns that the old master painters used on a regular basis. So this isn't a new thing that's just for photography. These are standard and very, very well-established artistic principles. And it's direction that provides those shadows and those shapes on the face. And we're going to look at some examples in a second. Something to remember that a lot of photographers forget, or they don't realize, is that it's essential in order for a picture to look harmonious, is that the light falls down and across the face. Because since we were born, we've been used to seeing faces being lit by natural light, and that means from the sun. So it doesn't matter, even if you're indoors, generally speaking, the light's placed up high, the windows are placed in a way so that the light falls down, the sun is up outside, so that even coming through the window, the light falls down and across. So if we see an image that has the light that's completely horizontal, for example, or worse, coming from below, it just looks wrong to us. And sometimes we don't know why. So if you're not a photographer, you just might think, I don't like that picture, or that looks weird. If you think about what happens if you shine a torch under your chin, we call that spooky Halloween lighting, right? Why is it frightening? It's because it's upside down. So that's something to remember, okay? Remembering that those nose shadows or those chin shadows need to be falling down and across. So I talked before about lighting patterns. So here are a couple of pictures of mine, and the one on the left, this is just to show you an example. I'm not going to go into huge detail because we've got a lot to cover, but butterfly lighting is on the left. That's when you generally have just a little shadow underneath the nose. And it's also called Hollywood or Paramount lighting because it was much beloved by Hollywood in the 1930s and 1920s and 1940s. It's very glamorous. And the one on the right, you can see, is a classic example of Rembrandt. And that's when you see that little triangle of light underneath one eye. And that's when the light is a little bit more at a 45-degree angle rather than being central, like on the one on the left, like the butterfly lighting. These are two of my favorites. Diffusion. What does this mean? Well, this is when we start to use modifiers like softboxes, grids to control the light. We might bounce the light, use reflectors. And some other quick principles is that the larger the light source, usually the softer the light is on the subject. The smaller the light source, the harder the shadow gradation. So if we think about the sun is huge, but it's so far away that in relation to the subject, it's tiny. It's a little tiny ball, very, very far away. So sunlight produces very harsh shadows, which can be a good thing or can be a bad thing, depends on your subject. Soft is not always better. Sometimes hard light looks incredibly glamorous. I think of Herb Ritts, and he used to love to shoot outside in the hard sunlight, creating these crisp, dark shadows, and then he would convert it to black and white, or shoot in black and white film, probably. He was shooting on film. Now, grids narrow the spread of light. Okay, sometimes people say to me, I don't understand why you would have a soft box to make the light soft and then you put a grid on it. Well, the grid isn't making the light harder. It's just controlling the spread of light so that it doesn't spray out everywhere. Feathering allows us to achieve very, very, very soft light, even with a relatively small light source or modifier. So here, this is a further control of the light. You might have, you think, oh, I've got a small soft box, therefore I can't have soft light. Not at all. You just bring it closer to the subject, meaning that it's larger in relation to the distance to the subject, and you feather it. So what's feathering? Well, here's a quick diagram that shows what I mean. Usually we will have a light, let's say at 45 degrees, pointing straight at the subject. And that's a pretty fail-safe way to shoot a subject. But what happens if we turn that light away from the subject and we shoot across the subject? What happens is that the edge of the light, or what we call the feather of the light, it's a very, very fine sort of spray. If you think of the light like being in a water coming out of a hose pipe, and if you press the hose pipe, you'll get a very concentrated jet in the middle, and then you'll get little bits of water spraying out on the sides. That's what feathering is. You turn the light away so that you can see the red arrow there is the main jet of light, and then the little fine spray on the side is just kissing the subject. Okay, so that's another way of controlling the light and creating magical light quality. Distance is a quick way to reduce the amount of power on a subject. So sometimes I'll be shooting a wedding and I'm really, really pressed for time. I just need to quickly lower the power of the light on the couple. I'll just move the light back a couple of feet. It doesn't really make any difference to the shadow gradation. It's just a couple of feet, but it just quickly reduces that power. You do have to remember, though, that the further away the light, you could have a huge softbox, but if it's in a huge studio on the other side of the room, it's not going to provide that soft light that you're looking for. Okay. So how many lights? Let's take a look at some images and see what happens if we have 1 light, 2 lights, 3 lights, or maybe no lights at all. So this is an example of 1 light. This is 1 light with the 1200 Pro, the AD 1200 Pro, which is super powerful. And I was able to, it's so powerful, I was able to shoot quite a way back, which gave me lots of room to maneuver. And I was using a ring flash. The ring flash is being held by my assistant at a 45 degrees, and we've got a really striking image, and it's far enough, it's far back enough, and it's directed at the model enough to light the background as well. Okay, so we've got full body, the light background is being lit, and we've got a very, very striking image with just 1 light. This is also one light. This is a beauty dish in an 8600 Pro. And this is giving a very, I'd say, editorial magazine look. Again, just with one light. You don't need to have lots and lots of lights. It really depends on what you want to do. I've got lots and lots of examples of one light images. It's my, I have to say, it's my favorite. This is another one light example. This is the AD300 Pro in the collapsible 65 centimeter softbox. Another one light example. I've got more of, this is an AD200, and I'm using a little bit of ambient light to fill in the shadows. You can see the shadows are lifted slightly compared to the one before. And I've also got a white reflector on the floor and to the side, which is also helping to fill in those shadows. This is one light, but this is on the other side of the subject. So I was shooting a live shoot educational event for, I think it was Imaging USA, and I was kind of trying to think of something different and creative to do. So I quickly said to the model, okay, she wanted to do something with her flute. She's a professional flautist. And I said, okay, let's just put the light behind you and let's do something else. And this is what happened. And yeah, I just wanted a little bit of variety. And this is something this is a setup I love to use now. So that's actually just the light behind her. I did, full disclosure, I cleaned up the edges of the softbox, so you can see that it's like a much cleaner circle. So that's something I did do in post-production. Another one light image. Here, this would have been a Rembrandt, but because she turned her face towards the subject, it became a butterfly. So what happens is the butterfly should be central, okay? But what happens if the model turns her face, okay? You have to take the light with the model so that you maintain that butterfly pattern. Another one light setup. This was with a much bigger softbox because I really needed to cover 2 people and not one. And so this is what I think this is an 8600 Pro, I believe, with a large umbrella. This is the AD300 Pro with the small collapsible 65 centimeter softbox from memory. And I have, you can see that in her catch lights, I've got a reflector providing the second light almost. So with the reflector it's a silver reflector, and you can really see that it's just bouncing up the light. So it's almost providing a clamshell. So a clamshell lighting situation is when you have a butterfly, but then you add a lower powered light underneath. So it's like a, I don't know if you can see my hands. It's like a clamshell opening and closing with the subject in between. Instead of adding a light, which is a little bit more cumbersome, I just like to use a reflector. Another one light for a very classic look. I have to say that the one light setup provides, I would say, a very classic painterly look. So if you're going for a painterly portrait look, then one light is your way to go, because that's how the painters used to light their subjects. It would be with a window, effectively. This is another one light image, and this has quite a lot of natural light acting as fill. So you can see that the shadows are super soft here. In fact, a lot of people confuse this for a natural light portrait. This is an AD200 Pro with a softbox, and I've just opened up my shutter speed, slowed down my shutter speed in order to allow more ambient light in and just reduce the contrast between the shadows and the highlights caused by the key light. This is another one light, but with a lot more contrast. So this is a light that's in a strip box. You can tell by the catch lights with that vertical line. So the strip box is enabling me to get a really powerful, high contrast Rembrandt light. So this was actually a test shot for a workshop that I was doing where I was teaching this particular lighting pattern. And the light is literally at a 90-degree angle to the camera. So I'm shooting here, the model's here, and the light was straight on to her at 90 degrees, sort of perpendicular to the camera. And that enabled me, I just got her to move her nose until I just got that Rembrandt light just as I wanted it. This is another one light setup. I'm going to show the same background that's lit later on with an additional light, and you will see the difference. This is a background that is a picture that I took of a cloudy sky, and then I had it printed as my backdrop, and it's my favorite backdrop, but it completely changes when it's lit. So I'm going to show you later. Now, this is one light, but what I was trying to do here was replicate a very, very soft natural light effect. So this is actually a 100 Pro, an AD 100 Pro, and I'm going to show you this is the effect I was going for. The one on the left is actually natural light. So this is the model is leaning against the window of my studio, which has a diffusion film on it, and I have white reflectors in front of her. But I was trying to create something a little bit similar, and I did that by doing this setup here. So I have the softbox right over her shoulder, above her head and behind her. And I have two white V-flats right in front of her with just a little gap for me to shoot through. So what that's doing is that the light behind her is coming, hitting those reflectors and then bouncing back to her, flooding her with this really soft daylight effect look, which was exactly what I was going for. And I'm able to shoot with, it's a 100-watt light, which is, if you think a speed light is about 76 watt seconds, the 100 has more power than that, but it's still a low wattage light if you compare it to the 1200 Pro or a 600 Pro. So I was able to create a really lovely portrait with just one AD 100 Pro. So there's another view of that lighting setup. And I've also got a little reflector there as well. So I'm trying to bounce light up as much as possible. And this is a trick one. This is actually shot with natural light, but I could easily have created this with the lighting techniques that I specified before, allowing lots of natural light to come through and just providing a very, very soft lighting effect. This was also shot with one light. Now, admittedly, there are 3 frames. Okay, so I didn't get all of these ladies into one frame. They simply wouldn't fit, and the backdrop wasn't long enough. So I took 3 frames and I just put them together. But there is one light illuminating between 3 to 4 ladies at once. Now we move on to 2 lights. This is my beautiful daughter, Ellie, and I'm using 2 lights because I needed to illuminate. Here, there are these dried flowers. I'm not sure what they're called. Not pampas. I'm not sure what they're called in English, but they're these very, very pretty dried flowers. And when I did the first shot with one light, I could see that I wasn't able to see the flowers. So I added an overhead light, just enough. It's very, very low. It's very, very subtle, but it's just enough to illuminate the top of those flowers behind her head. So it can be very, very subtle. I mean, sometimes the best lighting is a little bit like retouching, okay? It should be so subtle that you almost can't tell what's been done. So if I manage to achieve that, I'm always secretly delighted. This is another 2 light setup. Again, I've got a very, very low light, overhead light. You can barely see it. It's not even really illuminating the top of her head, just very, very, very slightly, and the backdrop. And I've got a reflector underneath. You can just see it in her catch light, just bouncing up the light to give her that beautiful glow. And there's a beauty dish lighting her as the key light. This is another one with the same setup. And this is another one, but on this one, I turned up the power of the overhead, the umbrella that was lighting her hair above her. I turned that up a little bit because I just wanted to catch the light on her hair. Can you see that? But it's not like an overpowering rim light. It's very, very subtle. So you don't have to make it, you know, so bright that everybody can see exactly what you're doing. Okay. This is also 2 lights. This is me. So this is this was me doing a self-portrait shoot. You know, I decided to put my money where my mouth is and get in front of the camera. So here's the same thing. I've got the lantern above overhead, kind of providing a fill light and illuminating the backdrop a little bit, filling in shadows. And I've got a softbox. I can't remember. I need to go back and look at the video. It's on the Godox YouTube channel. I need to go back and see if, I think it was for this shot, it was a softbox. Yes, here is the setup so we can see. I don't have to go and check the video. We have the lantern, which is behind me and above me, which is providing a little bit of light on my hair and the backdrop and filling in shadows. But again, it's very, very subtle. And then I've got a beauty dish. That was brave of me. At my age, usually a beauty dish is can be a little bit risky, because a beauty dish can sometimes emphasize it's a little bit less forgiving on the face. But I do love I love the glow that the silver beauty dish gives. So there's that setup. Moving on to 3 lights. Oh, so for this shoot, I was shooting this model against, I had the idea of a very strong black and white with white background that looked really cool and fashion, and using a wide angle lens so that I could sort of get the model kicking towards the lens and like having the shoe look bigger in the frame. But for some reason, the white background was just looking really, really boring. And I was kind of tearing my hair out. And this was I was filming the tutorial for Godox. And I actually just, I kind of sat in a corner for about 10 minutes, and then I came back and I thought, okay, I've got some gels in my bag. And I was looking at I was looking at her outfit, and I was looking at the colors, and I was like, the black, I can't turn this to black and white because of all the colors in the sequins. It's such a shame. I need to pick up on the colors that are in the outfit. So I pulled out the gels, put them on the 8200s, and I put them on the background, and just pow, it just brought everything to life. So that saved me. And I absolutely love this image. This is one of my favorites. There is the setup for that one. So you can see I've got a beauty dish on our gorgeous model, and I've got the 2 lower powered lights pointing at the background, one with a yellow gel and one with a fuchsia. In Italian, you say fuchsia. Bright pink, shocking pink. Let's make things easier. This was done on the same day with the same model, and I wanted to experiment with slow shutter speeds. And this is a 3 light setup. So what I wanted to do was just provide a little bit of rim light on the side of her body. Again, I don't want to blast it too strong. And then play with the color in the sequins again, but by dragging the shutter. So basically what you do is, do you remember when I said before that the shutter speed controls the ambient light and the aperture controls the power of the strobe? Well, this means that if there's ambient light in the studio, which there was, what you can do is slow down the shutter speed. The parts of the flash that is hitting the model is going to freeze the model. So that's why you can see her face crisp and clear and in focus. And then I moved the camera around with a slower shutter speed in order to get that kind of motion blur in underneath. So there's like a mix of motion blur with a nice crisp image. So there's the setup for that. And I've actually got the pilot light of the AD100 Pro with a gel pointing on her in order to provide that colored ambient light that we're going to see with the slower shutter speed. Okay, so I had a softbox on the model, 2 strip lights either side, not too bright. Okay, with rim lights, you don't want it blasting. You just want it very, very providing a 3-dimensionality. And there's another example of the same setup. This is 3 lights as well. In this case, I've got the lights pointing at the backdrop, but without the gels. So this is that bright white background that we're talking about. So the lights are pointing directly on the white wall, and then I've got a beauty dish straight on the model. That's it. Super simple, super commercial, works every time. The bright white background is just a fail-safe. It always looks great. This is 3 lights, and I had to make sure there was no ambient light whatsoever. I needed to freeze the dancer, so I'm using a much more powerful light with a very fast recycle time so that I could capture the moment. And you can just about see on the edge of her finger there and on her foot the 3-dimensionality. Okay, so that finger being lit there is because of the 3 light setup. If we didn't have that, that would just be gone into shadow. This is another 3 light setup. Again, you can see the rim light just on the shoulder, on her ear, on her hair, and it's providing that really 3-dimensional, it's like you can almost reach out and touch it. And we come to 4 lights. So remember when I said this backdrop lit looks completely different? Well, this is the 3 light setup, but with another light on the floor pointing up at the backdrop. And so what it looks like is that there's clouds, like it looks like there's a storm cloud behind her and the sun is coming out right behind her. It's amazing. It just kind of lifts this image to another level because I've lit that backdrop. So enhanced light for portraits. We were in the studio, now we're going outside. So what happens when we want to blend the ambient light and the key light and the strobe? Well, we use our ambient light. Remember we talked about shutter speed? Okay, I'm not going to go into high-speed sync because that's a whole another lesson. Let's stay within the normal sync speed of the camera. This is an example of what I call enhanced light. So what I do is I take the existing ambient light and then I control the light that is going onto the couple by adding the key light on them. In this case, if you can see that there's quite a shallow depth of field, there's a lot of compression in the background. And I did that by shooting at f2.8. And I was able to do that because I had a neutral density filter on my lens. You can also shoot at wider apertures using high-speed sync, but then you do lose a little bit of power. So if you've just got like an 8200 or an 8100, you might find that you don't have enough power if you start to go into the high sync speed. So that's why in this case I used a neutral density filter. These are more other examples of blending in a very subtle way the lights with the ambient light. So there's lots of ambient light. I'm just using a little pop of light to just control where the shadows are falling on the subjects and making it just that, you know, making sure that it's really super flattering. And on the one in the middle, I've got a light behind the model as well. These are 8200s in all of these situations. And the reason I've got the light behind the model in the middle is because I had my atmosphere in a can and I was spraying it, and it's not visible if it's not lit from behind. So I had to add that extra light there. This is another example of one light blended. Here, my second light is actually the setting sun. So you can see that golden sun coming in from the sunset behind her and lighting up her face. And then we've got the beauty dish with the 8200 that is providing that light on the face and the body. Exactly the same situation here. The second light is the sun and the ambient is the fill, and then we've got the key light, which is just lighting her and making her pop on the background. This is shot at Lake Garda, by the way, which is where I live in Italy. This is an island in the middle of the lake. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's where I shoot a lot of weddings. Now, this is one light blended, but here what I've done is I've really darkened the very bright sunny day, and I was able to do that because I was using the 1200 Pro, which is so powerful that I can really darken even very, very bright sunlight, bright Italian sunlight at midday. So I was almost able to turn it to night. And that was because I just wanted to get loads of drama. I really wanted to kind of use the power of the AD-1200 Pro. There's the same example as well. This is again with the AD-1200 Pro. I was shooting at, you can see that you can tell by the starburst that I'm shooting at probably f/16, I would imagine, something like that. I was really, really trying to push the light to the maximum to get maximum drama and really kind of take the AD-1200 Pro out for a spin and see what it could do. This is a real wedding. This is one of those situations where the bride said, you have to get this view. It wasn't just about the portrait of the bride anymore. It was all about getting the view. So I used I think this is a 400 watt light, and it's able to compete with the sun in the sky. Well, it's not overpowering the sun, it's balancing with the sun. So I'm able to darken down the horizon so that I can see those mountains, I can see the clouds in the sky, but at the same time, I can light my bride and make her look fabulous, and also make the landscape look fabulous. This is an example of just the ambient. So what happened when I've got a backlight, as in the sun, and I'm not using my lights? Well, this is what happened. And I love this picture. I love the silhouette, and the couple loved it, but I couldn't shoot the whole shoot all in silhouette. So this is where the light comes in. And this was actually bare bulb. It was a windy day, so I couldn't have any umbrellas or softboxes or anything. So I just had a bare bulb. I love to use one light in order to just take this is completely unretouched, by the way. This is just straight out of camera. It just gives the group shots of a wedding just that special look, using a studio light. In this case, it's the AD-300 Pro with the 65 centimeter softbox. And some people say to me, how can you light the whole group with such a small modifier? Well, it's all about feathering. Remember I talked about feathering before? That's what I'm doing. I'm feathering across the group so that they're all being covered. It's all about control. It's all about knowing where to place the light, where to position it, and then you can really do incredible things even with a relatively small modifier. This is another big group lit by the AD-300 Pro and a 65 centimeter softbox. So I'm not sure what that is in inches, but it's not big at all. It's like this, okay? So it's not a huge light at all. I can't possibly have huge modifiers out at weddings. That's never going to work. So again, this is completely unretouched, unedited. This is straight out of camera. And I'm helped a lot by the fact that there's a white glossy stage, I will admit, because a lot of the light is hitting that and bouncing back up. But again, by feathering that light across the group, I was able to get everybody, and they absolutely loved these images, because without that light, we wouldn't have been able to see that deep blue sky, which in the dusk, the blue hour was coming, what we called aura blue, the blue hour, when everything kind of turns blue. So the couple were and their family were absolutely delighted with these images. Another way that we can, oh my God, take flash and control our light. If you shoot weddings, or if you want to shoot weddings, you're going to stumble across this situation, okay? That's me. You can just see me there in the corner. These were taken by my second shooter, who was also my husband, and he didn't have a flash trigger. We didn't have a flash trigger for him. He was just doing the ambient light, but I was doing the flash work. And so now you can see proper skin tones. These are actually printable images thanks to the off-camera flash that I was using, which was a 3-point setup. And here I'm going to show you how I lit this wedding. We've got ambient light. Obviously, you can see we've got the festoon lighting, which is gorgeous, but without the 3 lights here, placed exactly here, pointing in, high up, pointing down and in towards the middle, we would never have been able to capture this whole scene as we did, or capture this wonderful shot. If I just had on-camera flash here, we just would have had the bride lit and the bridesmaids or all of the bride, the female bridal party. Well, not all female. There's actually some guys there trying to catch the bouquet, but they wouldn't have been lit either. So this is my fail-safe 3-point setup, as you saw it laid out there, that enables me to capture everything. And just before we wrap up, I just want to show you the power of being taught lighting techniques to raise your game. So this was a photographer who came to me asking, very successful photographer, who wanted to do fine art portraiture in the studio. And he said to me, how's this? Could we take this and with editing, can we turn this into a fine art style portrait? And I said, no, you need to get the lighting right first. So after about a month or two working with me, he was coming up with this sort of thing after studying the lighting patterns and me coming to his studio and showing him how to place his lights and how to work with lighting. Very, very important. Just a reminder before we wrap up, before we start the Q&A, join the Facebook group, and I would love to hear from you and answer your questions. And with that, I would like to open up to the Q&A. Throw me your questions. I would love to answer them if we have time.
Wow, that was awesome, Sarah. We definitely do have time, and we're going to get started because we already have questions in. First question coming from Cooley joining us on YouTube. Is there a way to use the Fresnel head in a softbox rather than using the AB2 head because of modeling lights?
Yes, of course. Yes, I do it all the time. Sometimes I'm just short on time and I don't have time to change the head. I just stick the Fresnel head in there and yeah, it's fine. A lot of the images that you saw probably had the Fresnel head in. I mean, I do, if I want to do things properly, yes, I do like to put that bulb head in there because obviously that's what it's designed for. But I do confess that I have put the Fresnel head in the softbox, yes.
Okay, we had a lot of question on modifiers, so I'm just going to throw it out there before we dive into the particulars. What's your favorite modifier setup to use?
And it depends on what I'm shooting. It really does. Okay, if I have to choose one, then it would be a 120 meter softbox with a grid. Okay. If I have to choose one, but okay. It really depends on what I'm shooting. As I said, it depends on the age of the person. It depends on the look that I'm going for. Do I want it to be super soft? Do I want it to be specular? And when I say specular, I mean, do I want those sort of reflections on the highlights and on the nose, which really you need a beauty dish for? So it really depends.
I gotta say, it's so refreshing to have somebody who's so comfortable talking about light across, pun not intended, across the spectrum. Because I feel like now it's like everybody's got a YouTube channel. Everybody talks about, okay, you throw a light up, you do this. But there's such an intent and purpose with the way that you light. And you can tell the way that you talk about it, you really know what you're going for. You really go right to the gear and to the modifier that the situation calls for. And I think that I just wanted to point that out because it's such a great thing to see nowadays. Somebody that really knows the craft and really has put in the work to focus in on what is really going to take this image to the next level. What is the right piece of lighting? What is the right modifier for not only the subject in front of the camera, but for the situation and paying attention to the ambient light, the background, all of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I put it. Yeah, it's everything. That's all I can say. Lighting is everything. It's absolutely everything.
Yes, it really is. We're going to continue with the questions here. Vernon's asking about the V-flats that you're using. Are you using the standard V-flats? What size V-flats do you incorporate into your work?
They're quite small. They're not the big ones that you get in the commercial studios because my studio isn't huge. And also, I tend to, over the years, I worked alone a lot. I didn't have an assistant most of the time while I was shooting. So it's actually that they're not even proper V-flats. They're something I ordered. It's basically cardboard. It's something that you might use at an expo to display, but I just had it printed black on one side and left white on the other. So they're not tall at all. I would say maybe 2 meters high.
Okay. All right, not bad. Now, we do have a lot of situational questions, so I'm going to put it out there for everybody. If you're getting questions in, just try to be as detailed as possible if you're referring to a specific image, because we did have a lot of questions asking about this image here. How did you do this? Or how did you light this? So I just want to make sure that we're talking about the right image so that we can get your questions answered properly. Anna was asking about your backdrops in particular. What is there a brand of backdrop that you go to? She says these look like some Mayhew backdrops. What kinds of
No.
backdrops do you know and love?
Okay, so I've only ever used my own backdrops. So I painted a couple, and then I printed a couple on what they call in Italy TNT, which is it's like a very, very fine light, but it doesn't last for very long. So I had to throw them away after a while, but they're very inexpensive. And then a backdrop company called Click Props Backdrops took my designs, and they produce my designs. So the ones that I painted, I basically captured a digital version of it, and they produce them.
Awesome. We're going to take it back to a specific image. The picture of the bride with that beautiful view behind her, at the water behind her. What type of modifier did you use in that photo, if any?
It was a softbox. Yeah, it was a pop-up softbox.
Perfect. Karen joining us live on Zoom says, thank you, Sarah. I do photograph a lot of older women. What would you suggest to do the flat lighting to most flat? What would you suggest to do the flat lighting to most flatter them? I saw several examples you showed, wondering if there is something you suggest. So for photographing older women, is there something that's more flattering as far as lighting setup?
Yeah, you want to stay away from all of the harder type of lighting, and basically try to fill in the shadows as much as possible. So when you fill in the shadows, you're basically filling in the wrinkles. So that's why I said when I was taking the picture of, with the picture of me, I had the beauty dish, but the beauty dish was just providing a tiny little, because the beauty dish is traditionally known as being fairly hard and specular and not ideal for older women. So in my studio, if I'm ideally, I wouldn't use any light at all. I would use natural light, because I have big windows, and I would just face my subject onto those big windows and have just everything coming as flat as possible and soft as possible. That's going to cut down your editing and your retouching time hugely. If you don't have that and you're using or if you want if you need the control, basically, because I mean, in my studio, it starts getting dark at about 4 p.m. in the winter, so that makes it very difficult. In which case, I would use a feathered. I would probably have the reverse umbrella, feathered, and I would have a reflector. So literally filling in the shadows, because the wrinkles are nothing other than shadows being cast by the light.
I love this. It's like we could play Stump Sarah. It's like you already have the whole lighting scheme worked out in your head with just the situation there. Tracy's asking, in your 3-point setup, do you meter the scene from different areas, or is there a go-to power setting that you go to?
No. Okay. Confession time. I've never used a light meter.
It's okay.
I'll just eyeball it and adjust as I go. And yeah, I don't know what to say.
I feel like once you get to a certain point, it comes with experience. The power output. You're going to find that most of your setups are going to require generally the same settings. You're going to be in the ballpark, and as long as you can get in the ballpark, you can take a test image and see, okay, I might need to tweak this.
Yeah. And then I would suggest doing one light at a time. So start with your backlights and then add your key light, or start with your key light and then add your back, do it separately so that you can see what's going on. But yeah, once you've got your setup, then that's it. You don't really have to change anything. It's the same with weddings. I kind of know what my lights are still on the settings from the previous wedding. So nothing really changes that much, unless you've got a huge room or a smaller room, then maybe a little bit. But I'll be completely honest. When I started using Flash, it took me years to get to grips with Flash, because I'm so bad. I actually have dyscalculia, which means that it's like being dyslexic with numbers. So when I saw the like 1/64 I freaked out, because I was like, I got to do maths. I can't do this. So I bought a flashlight, not a flashlight, sorry, a speed light with a dial on the back, until I got comfortable just turning the light up or down with the dial. Now it's like I've got over my mental block and I can deal with the fractions and the, you know, working out all of the different, you know, I say that so that people who can't deal with stuff, technical stuff like that, I want to make you feel better and, you know, kind of say it's fine. You don't need to understand it. It's fine.
Definitely. Jose, and speaking about number of lights, Jose's asking how many lights were used for the Facebook post image with the black dress.
Facebook post image. The ballerina for the okay, that was good question. That was one light overhead shot through I was experimenting with using a scrim. I don't need this because I have the ambient light. Remember, I was talking about using ambient light in my studio, but I was trying to experiment for teaching purposes. So I had the 8200 shot through a softbox and then shot through a scrim to provide fill light. And then I had a key light, another 8200 in a 120-meter softbox with a grid lighting the ballerina as a key light. Camera left. Oops.
And we had a lot of questions on the feathering of the group photo. So the group photo seemed to be a popular one. I think you have a lot of the viewers mystified with how you did that. So the basic gist of all the questions are, how are you piecing it together? How is the lighting scheme for each person? How many people are in each shot? How are you feathering the light? Where are you pointing the light towards? You have obviously women in white dresses, men in black suits. So are you handling it differently when you're lighting the men versus the women?
No, exactly the same. And the rule is this: you want to be okay. If you can see me, right? You can see my hands.
Yep.
Okay. So if this is the softbox, I want to set it so that if you imagine the softbox is like this, the light continues out not in a hard line, because we talked about the feathering, right? But the light spreads out like this. So I point the light so that the end, this side, is reaching the end of the group. So it's kind of it's shooting across them.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Now, sometimes in that very long line, it's going to drop off towards the end a little bit. You know, which
so
it's
like a diagonal. So one person's obviously you're getting the more powerful part of the light at one side of the group, and then the far end. But you're taking something that, instead of pointing it directly at like this, it's really angles and geometry at this point, where if you have a beam that, say, is a 10-degree beam right there, but you point it at an angle, you're going to get that spread, and you turn 10 degrees into 45 degrees, albeit at the cost of a little bit less light reaching the further end than the short end.
Yeah. So if I was pointing at the start of the group, then the beginning of the group would be overly lit, and the rest of the group wouldn't get it. But if you turn the light so that it's shooting across them and in front of them, they're all getting a little bit of light, and they don't need that much. They don't need that much because of the aperture that I'm shooting at, and because of the amount of ambient light. They really don't need that much. And if you shoot across them, then it kisses all of them rather than being focused on just one. So you have to remember, you don't have to point the light at, if the light is this big, that doesn't mean that it's only going to light one person. If you angle it and shoot across everybody, they're all going to get a little spray of light.
Okay. I'm working this angle right here. Let's see if I can get my key light to trying to do it on the fly. All right. Hughes News, Views, and Reviews. I love that name. Joining us on YouTube. When balancing flash with daylight, do you use TTL or full manual?
Sorry, can you say that again? I was going back into I wanted to be able to see you. So, okay,
yes.
We're not sharing the screen anymore, right?
Nope, no shared screen right now, just us. Asking about balancing flash with daylight, do you use TTL or full manual?
Okay, so TTL I only ever use if I have a on flash camera. So if I have camera on flash, then I use TTL because the distance is constantly changing, and so therefore the power is gonna change. And TTL is really useful for that. So if I'm shooting a wedding, that's the only time I'll use on-camera flashes at a wedding. I'll have on-camera flash and 3 off-camera flashes. The off-camera flashes are manual because they stay static. but I'm moving around, I'm getting close, I'm moving far away. And so on camera is TTL and it's firing the others. Other than that, in the studio or on location, it's always manual.
Okay. So we had another question that was kind of similar there. Cooley's asking if you ever use the Godox flash on the camera as a trigger for the 8200s to light the dance floor. Would that be a situation that you were just talking about there?
Yeah, exactly. So what I do is I have one on my 70 when on the camera with the 70 to 200, I don't have on camera flash because I'm usually at 100 to 200 millimeter focal length. So there's no point in having on camera flash. So I just have the X Pro trigger on that. On the 35 millimeter, I'm getting in there and I'm nice and close, and I've got the fill flash, but it's really low. It's like TTL -2 stops.
Okay.
Just a tiny little bit of fill.
Just a little pop. Okay. And our final question coming from Anna joining us on YouTube, asking about the lighting setup for the white background with the doves.
Mm-hmm. So okay, so that was exactly the same as the one before it, but without the gel.
Interesting.
And probably I turned up the power a little bit because I just blasted light everywhere. I just wanted it to look heavenly, so I just whacked up the power. But it's exactly the same. The lights are just pointing at the background. That's all.
Awesome. See, that wasn't too bad. Look, we couldn't stump you. Totally prepared for everything that comes. Look, this is how you can tell a wonderful professional photographer. All they are is really just a great problem solver. No matter what is thrown your way, that's really it, right? You go into a setting, you have to know how to get the best possible image out of it. Do you do a lot of pre-preparation when you are shooting weddings? If it's a new venue, what is your
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm really looking for, so I don't always use lighting for portraits. What I'm doing is I will look for the light that is flattering to the couple. So I will look for, I will only pull out the light if I need to capture, let's say, a big venue and the couple need to be in front and the lighting is terrible for them. I'm forced into placing them where they are because I need to capture the venue behind them. In that case, I'll pull out the light so that I can control the light on their face. Other than that, I will just walk around and I will find little corners where I know that the natural light is going to be flattering on them. And that's usually somewhere covered where the lighting is sort of coming in on a nice soft angle. So I don't like the light coming too much from above, like out in the open. Even if it's a cloudy sky, it's not terribly flattering. So I like to find little sort of they call them nicchie in Italian, little like cubby holes and little sort of places where I can find them.
I love this, Sarah. This was great. A ton of great examples here, a ton of information. This is going to be a workshop that you're all going to want to bookmark and come back to time and time again. Everybody should be this comfortable with lighting. I think it really is a huge skill set to have because you can go into any situation and know that you're going to get great images out of it, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm very comfortable with the. I'm the only thing I'm a little bit. I'm so comfortable with my Godox. Like, I mean, I know I'm going to say that because they're hosting us, but this is the truth. This is the absolute truth. I have to have my Godox lights because I'm so comfortable with them. I know how they work. They're so reliable. Like everything changed for me when I used to use very expensive on-camera flashes that had bells and whistles and all kinds of things, but nothing seemed to work, and it was so frustrating. It took me a long time. So if I do understand it, it's because I spent many weddings. I would get all of the safe shots done using high ISO and just ambient light, and then I would stay an extra hour at the wedding. I'd pull out my light stands and I would try and make it work. And it's when you basically just learn on the job, when you just by trying and experimenting, that's when it goes in, so my recommendation is just practice, just try everything and see what works.
Perfect. Well, wonderful advice across the board. I want to thank you, Sarah. I can't thank you enough. I know it's evening there and you're getting ready to wind down for the day. So I want to thank you for joining us. 10
p.m. now. It's past my bedtime.
Oh, wow. It's past my bedtime over there. So we're going to let you go. But a huge thank you again to you for sharing your expertise with us, and to Godox for hosting today's event. And to all of our viewers out there, thank you for getting your questions in. We love when you guys are interacting with us. We do it
Yeah.
for you. We can't do it without you. So huge thank you to Sarah, the entire Godox team, and all of our viewers out there. But that is it. Another round of the B&H virtual event space is in the books. Catch y'all next time.